The teaching at Vedantu was amazing. One aspect where Vedantu teaching differed from a normal offline coaching was the attention teachers gave to our doubts. No matter how many times we asked a doubt, the teachers would patiently clear the doubt every single time. And they made learning a very fantastic experience for us.
Alright, hi everyone, good evening. I hope all of you are doing really well. Well, first of all, I'd like to apologize because yesterday we skipped our session and today there is a little bit of a delay in our session, but welcome nonetheless. Well, today we are going to start with chapter 1, that is nutrition in plants. Alright, now this is one of my favorite chapters. Alright, when I was in 7th grade, I used to love this chapter and I always, while revision, I always used to come back to this chapter. Okay, Dubey says hi Dubey. Thank you for joining us. Now, before we start this session, I would like to, get into this solve the mystery mode. Okay, so we're going to together try and solve this mystery. All right. Okay. So if you're ready to solve this mystery with me, you can comment in the live chat. I'll be able to read you. And if you are watching this later, then you can read the mystery with me. Pause the screen, pause the video, and think about it. And then later, continue with the video. Alright, let's see what the mystery is about, right? Okay, so this is kind of like a story, okay? I'm going to read it off the board. You can read it for yourself as well. So, once upon a time, there was a lion. He was the king of the jungle, okay? He would eat any animal he wanted. He was living happily in the jungle when one day tragedy struck. All the trees died, okay? Lion could not see any tree in the sight. Perfect? A very simple story. There was a lion. He was the king of the jungle. He used to eat any animal that he wanted. Alright? But one day tragedy struck and the trees just went away. No tree in sight at all. Let's see what exactly happens. What exactly is the mystery element that we are going to try and solve? Okay. A month later, the lion dies. Okay? This is the story and this is the conclusion. This is exactly what happens after a month. Now we have to understand why exactly did the lion ended up dying. Okay, do you have any guesses? I can actually read the chat, so you can comment in the chat, and if you're watching this later, then you can guess it, pause the video, guess, and then continue with the video. Alright, so let's try and understand what exactly happened. Let's try and break down what exactly happened. Okay, so here I have, you can see that there is a chain kind of a thing happening here. You can see that there is a lion, there is a fox, there is a very cute rabbit, and then there is of course carrot. Now the lion's favorite meal is actually a fox. Okay, lion used to love to eat fox and fox used to love to eat a rabbit. And I think all of us know what rabbits love to eat the most. Rabbits love to eat carrots the most. But where exactly do carrots come from, right? Carrots come from plants. Alright, so let's look at it again once more. If plants are not there, then carrots do not exist, right? And if carrots do not exist, then you won't have the rabbit who loves to have carrots, right? And if rabbits do not exist, then the fox will have nothing to eat. And if fox has nothing to eat, the fox will die. If the fox dies, then the lion will have nothing to eat. So do you see, can you relate that if the carrot is not there, then none of these animals would be able to exist on planet Earth, right? This is how important plants are for us. Not just carrot, but every plant, every flora that's there on planet Earth, right? So we get all our nutrients from actually plants. But now why do we get all our nutrients from plants? Because plants are able to actually make their food and we cannot. We can cook food that we get from plants and other animals, but we cannot actually make our own food. Okay, so the moral of the story is that if plants do not exist, then we would not be able to exist as well. Not just us, but all the other animals which live around us. Alright, Dubey, that's the correct answer. I read it on the live chat. Alright, let's move on. Now, this whole process of taking in food and using it for energy has a very scientific term. It's right there on the board. Okay, it's actually called nutrition. Now this is a very scientific definition which you will find in your notebooks. Nutrition is the mode through which organisms take in food and utilize it to gain energy. Okay, but out of this you only have to remember two main things. Okay, eating food how do we take in food, how do we consume food, and second, how do we use the energy that we get from food. Okay, now there are two very primary modes of nutrition, right? When I say modes of nutrition, all I mean is how the way we take in food differs and how we utilize it to gain energy differs. Okay, just two differences, only two things you have to remember. Now let's try to understand plants first. Why we are trying to understand plants? Because plants actually end up making their food while we don't, we cannot, right? We saw that the lion died, and just the same, if all the plants from planet Earth vanished away, we would not be able to exist. So let's try and see what mode of nutrition plants have. Okay, mode of nutrition in plants. Mode of nutrition in plants is basically self-nourishment. Plants have a very self-nourishment system. Now when I say self-nourishment means basically they are able to make their own food. They are able to nourish their own bodies. Okay, now self and nourishment has a little bit of a scientific term. For self we have auto, and for nourishment we have trops. Okay, so when we combine auto and trops together, we get autotrophs, right? Then plants actually have autotrophic nutrition, right? This is the mode of nutrition in which living organisms are able to make their own food using very simple substances. As you can see in the diagram, they use very simple substances like carbon dioxide, sunlight, soil, water to make their food, right? While we derive food from other animals or plants. So this mode of nutrition is actually called autotrophic mode of nutrition. Anamika says hi. Hi Anamika. Alright. So autotrophic mode of nutrition is only for plants. Now let's see what are plants actually called. This is something that we've already mentioned. Plants are called autotrophs, right? Remember, auto means self and trophs means nourishment. That means plants can actually nourish themselves. Alright. So two things you have to remember. What is nutrition? Nutrition is how you take in food and how you actually utilize it to gain energy. Then we read about the new mode of nutrition in plants, which is actually autotrophic nutrition, where living organisms use very basic simple things like carbon dioxide, water, minerals to actually make their food. We as animals do not make our own food, right? And we also learned that plants are called autotrophs. Why are they called autotrophs? Because when you break down auto into auto and trophs, it means self-nourishment. They make their own food to nourish themselves. Alright, now let's take a look at the mode of nutrition for animals. It's a little bit different, actually very different. Okay, animals depend on other animals or plants for food. It's very natural, right? So we cannot make our own food. We almost always depend on plants or other animals, right? We eat chicken, we would eat fish, those are other animals. We would have spinach, that is plant, right? So let's try and understand what does the other mean and what does nutrition mean here. Let's go back. Okay, hetero. Now for other and nourishment, because we're getting nourishment from others, we're getting nourishment from other plants, right? From plants and other animals, there is a very scientific term for this. So hetero means others and trophs means nourishment. So when you get nourishment from others, I think you can already guess what human beings or animals in general are called, what their mode of nutrition is called. We can use good Dubey, we can actually use heterotrophic mode of nutrition. That is the mode of nutrition that we in fact use. Alright, so heterotrophic nutrition is the mode of nutrition in which living organisms actually depend upon other animals or plants, right, for their food needs. When you consume food, you gain energy from that. And what exactly are we called? We already saw that plants are actually called autotrophs. That means self-nourishment. We in fact are called heterotrophs, which basically means other nourishment. We get our nourishment from other animals and plants. Okay, let's try to get like a tiny quiz inside and then we're going to move on to the plant's kitchen. Alright, so you have to look at the picture. Do you think it's an autotroph or a heterotroph? You can comment in the live chat, and if you're watching this later, then you can pause it, think about it and comment it or keep it with yourself. Do you think it's an autotroph or a heterotroph? I think it looks like a plant, of course, right? So it's an autotroph because we've already seen that autotrophs actually end up making their own food using simple substances, right? Let's look at the next one. So it's an autotroph. Let's look at the next one. It's a fish, right? What do you think? Fishes make their own food, or do you think they depend on other animals or plants for food? Okay, yes, Dubey, you are the first. Fishes are actually heterotrophs, right? Fishes cannot make their own food. Fishes are also animals, so they depend on other animals or seaweeds or plants which live inside the water for their food. Let's take a look at this. Now this is a little bit complicated. I know it looks like grass, but it's actually seaweed, basically plants which live inside the water. What do you think? Is it an autotroph or a heterotroph? Do you think plants which live inside the water can make their own food? Yes or no? You can comment in the chat. Autotrophs. Okay. Eastern India says autotrophs. Fair enough. What else do you think? Do you think it can be autotroph or a heterotroph? It actually in fact is an autotroph. So as hard as it might be to believe, all the plants which also live inside the water also undergo the process of making their own food, right? They also use sunlight, they also use oxygen that they get from the water around to make their food. So they are also autotrophs and not heterotrophs. Perfect. Now can you guess which part of your house is this? If you could just write it in the chat quickly, because I can read the chat, or again, if you're watching this later, you can freeze it and write it in the comments later. Well, which part of your house is this? Well, it's in fact, of course, very obviously the kitchen, right? So it's the kitchen. It's the kitchen part of any one of our houses. Though today we're not going to be talking about your kitchen, we're going to be talking about plants' kitchen. Right? We're going to be talking about plants' kitchen, where they make their own amazing, awesome food, which also provides energy to us in turn. Alright, let's try to understand photosynthesis. Now this whole word we're going to break down a little bit later, but we're going to try to understand the whole process of photosynthesis in the form of a recipe. Alright, so where is it exactly happening? It's actually happening in the kitchen, and the kitchen of the plant is in the leaves. All the action that goes on happens in the leaves. Food is prepared in the leaves for every plant, almost every plant that you come across. Alright, what exactly is the plant making? What is the name of the dish? Plants are actually making carbohydrates, right? Carbohydrates is basically a form of glucose, right? Something that they make as food. It's the most basic form, right? And what are the ingredients? Remember we talked about ingredients in the previous video, right? Ingredients is everything that goes into making the dish, right? So remember when I was trying to bake that pizza and I told you that I would need maida, I would need salt, I would need some chicken, paneer, right? So all those are ingredients. So photosynthesis also is a process in which you require a lot of ingredients. Let's try to read them together, right? We have water, we have minerals, we have carbon dioxide, we have chlorophyll, and we have sunlight. All right? Perfect. So we've already seen where does the action happen? It happens in the leaves. Leaves are basically the kitchen of the plant, right? Then you have the dish name. We know that plants are creating carbohydrates. That's exactly what they're cooking in the leaves. And what exactly do they need? What are the ingredients? Here they are. They're water, minerals, carbon dioxide, chlorophyll, and sunlight. Now let's try to understand the process a little bit more. All right? But fun question when I was learning photosynthesis when I was a kid was, where do these ingredients come from? Are they literally just coming from anywhere, right? But these ingredients are coming from very, very specific places. Okay, so let's try and understand how are these ingredients delivered, where are they delivered from? Okay, so water and minerals are actually delivered from the soil. So the minerals, vitamins and nutrients which are required by the plants are dissolved in the water, and water is carried up to the leaves. Okay, so where are the ingredients such as water and minerals, nutrients coming from? They're coming from the soil. Let's try to understand where does carbon dioxide come from, right? Carbon dioxide is present in the air around us all the time. So carbon dioxide is coming from the air. Third, chlorophyll. Chlorophyll is already present in the leaf. Now, if you don't know what chlorophyll is actually the green pigment that's present in the plant, which gives it that, of course, the green color, the classic green color that we see everywhere around us, right? Now, the chlorophyll is very important. Without chlorophyll, photosynthesis would not be possible. Chlorophyll actually helps to capture the sunlight. But hold on, more of it a little bit later. Let's try to understand where are all these ingredients coming from. Sunlight, of course, comes from the air, comes from the sun. I should have written sun there, that's more appropriate. Cool. So we have seen all the ingredients that we need, which part is the kitchen, what is the name of the dish, what exactly is the plant cooking, and we have seen where every ingredient is coming from. Alright, now let's try to understand who or which part of the plant is actually working to deliver these ingredients for the process of photosynthesis. Alright, so the first delivery boy, delivery girl that we're going to meet is stomata. Now stomata delivers carbon dioxide. It does something a little bit more, which I'll tell you as we progress. Okay, so now as you can see, there are two bean-like structures. Okay, and this is stomata in the middle. Now the guard cells actually contract and expand. Okay, so they contract when they want to close up and they expand when they want to open, right? So when carbon dioxide comes in, they contract, and when oxygen goes out later, which we will come to, it expands. Okay, so just two things to remember. There are guard cells which expand and contract, and then there is stomata. Okay, stomata helps to deliver carbon dioxide in the process of photosynthesis. Perfect. Let's try to meet the other deliveries. Alright. Alright, now let's try to understand where does water, minerals and nutrients come from that plants need in the process of photosynthesis. Vessels. Now as you can see, vessels are basically like, you know, straws, right? They're basically like tiny thin, very extremely thin thread like straws which are present inside the stem, right? So if this is the stem, you will have hundreds and millions of these tiny vessels which are actually carrying the water and minerals, nutrients up to the leaves. Okay, so we have already discussed stomata, we have discussed the vessels. Let's try to understand where does chlorophyll and sunlight come from. Now this is a little bit tricky. Okay, so leaves deliver chlorophyll. Leaves naturally have chlorophyll in them. And how does it capture sunlight? So chlorophyll in fact captures sunlight. That's how sunlight is used in the process of photosynthesis. Alright, so we've already seen vessels, we've already seen stomata, and we've already seen leaves. Alright, so we already know which part of the plant is working to deliver which ingredient. Perfect. Sorry, there's a glitch. Okay, now let's try to remember when I told you that there is a meaning behind breaking down photosynthesis. This is exactly what it is, right? Photo means light and synthesis means to prepare. Now photosynthesis cannot happen without the sunlight. Until unless light is there, photosynthesis would not be able to happen. So you're preparing food in the presence of light. Photosynthesis, the word exactly means that, right? To prepare your food in the presence of light. This is something that's of course present there in your books, but something that is very easy to remember, right? So whenever there is a question which says there is no sunlight, right, will the plants be able to prepare their own food, you will automatically know that no, plants will not be able to prepare their own food because photosynthesis in itself requires light to prepare food. Okay, now there is a very not chemical equation, but there is kind of an equation which is there associated with photosynthesis. It's very easy to understand, so we're going to quickly go through it, right? So it says carbon dioxide plus water. Carbon dioxide plus water we've already discussed, right? Carbon dioxide we get from the air, and who delivers carbon dioxide? Stomata does, right? And water, where do we get water? We get water from the soil, and there are tiny vessels in the stem which deliver water up to the leaves. Now there is a small arrow, and then there is sunlight and chlorophyll. So plant uses carbon dioxide and water in the presence of sunlight and chlorophyll. Now when I say chlorophyll and sunlight, both of them are very important. If you don't have chlorophyll, you will not be able to capture sunlight, right? So if you don't have chlorophyll, there is no sunlight. So both of them are very essential, and if their presence is not there, then photosynthesis cannot happen, right? So this is the input, this is what's going in, all the ingredients, and this is what plant actually ends up making. Plant ends up making carbohydrates, a form of starch, right, and oxygen. Now plants end up making oxygen. Can you guess what is oxygen? Why is oxygen important? what is the most important task oxygen has? What do we do with oxygen? If you could comment in the live chat, and if you're watching it later, then you can of course pause, think, and then continue with the video, right? Now, one of the most important tasks oxygen has on planet Earth is we use it for respiration, right? Right now I am breathing and you're breathing. Both of us are breathing in this oxygen. Yes, exactly. It helps us in respiration, right? So both of us are breathing the air oxygen. No other air in the air, just oxygen. All right. So in case plants are not producing oxygen while photosynthesis, there would be a lack of oxygen, right? We'll just be exhaling carbon dioxide. There'll be a lot of carbon dioxide and less of oxygen, which doesn't make sense because there are a lot of people, right? So the equation makes sense. So there's carbon dioxide, water in the presence of sunlight and chlorophyll, which results in the production of carbohydrates and oxygen. Let's try and move on. Okay, now this is something that confused me all the time when I was a kid, right? Only true or false, only green colored leaves make their food, right? I have come across leaves and I have come across plants which are not really green, and I'm pretty sure you have too. And this is a common confusion, right? If the green pigment chlorophyll that we've talked about is not there, then how is the plant able to, how is the plant able to make its own food? Because if chlorophyll is not there, it's not able to capture the sunlight, and then photosynthesis cannot happen, right? So the question that comes into your mind is, if the plant is not green, if it's anything other than green, then how is it making its own food? Now the trick here is, plants can have another color, but they always have a certain amount of chlorophyll in them. That basically means they might not be green in color, they might be some other in color, but they always have a certain amount of chlorophyll. But the other pigment, for example, the red pigment or the orange pigment or yellow pigment that they have is a little bit more stronger than chlorophyll. That is why they don't have the color green, but every other color, right? But that does not mean that it does not have chlorophyll. Even plants which don't have the color green also have a certain amount of chlorophyll, which can be used for photosynthesis. All right. Okay. So clear? This is a very common doubt, comes across. It's there in the book. When you read it, you will come across this this point. Okay. Let's try to move on to the next slide. Okay. Thanks the way you say okay. Sorry, there's a technical glitch. Okay. Alright, so the next thing that we're going to move on to is what the importance of nitrogen. Okay, why is nitrogen important? Now, as you know, nitrogen is a gas. Nitrogen is something that's present all around us all the time. But plants in itself cannot use nitrogen to make proteins. Okay, so they can use water and carbon dioxide to make carbohydrates or starch, but they need to use nitrogen to make proteins and fats. Okay, I'm going to repeat that again. It's a little bit complicated. Okay, so they use water and carbon dioxide to make carbohydrates like we saw in photosynthesis, but they need nitrogen to make basically proteins and fats, right? But they don't use the nitrogen that's present in the air around us just like that. For that, there is a very specific kind of bacteria which is present in the root of the plant, okay, and it basically converts all this nitrogen which is around us and gives it to the plant. Alright, that is why nitrogen is very important. Two things you have to remember: that nitrogen is important because it helps the plant to produce protein and fats. Okay, and second, there is a specific kind of bacteria in the roots of the plants which helps to convert the nitrogen in the air and gives it to the plant. Okay, so this is important to make proteins and is absorbed from the air by the bacteria which is in the roots. Okay, not directly, not from stomata. Stomata is only for carbon dioxide. Okay, so now we're going to quickly go through the process of photosynthesis. Now what we're going to do on the screen, you can see that there are a lot of pictures, right? Okay, I'm going to show you the next screen. There are a couple of questions. So what we're going to do, we're going to use all these pictures, right? And we're going to answer all these questions. Basically, these are the answers and that's the question. Okay, so let's start with the first question. Where does it happen? Now, where does the process of photosynthesis takes place? What do you think? Does it take place in the stem? Does it take place, let's say, in the flower? Does it take place in the roots? Or does it take place in the bark? It happens in the leaf, of course. Thank you. It does in fact happen in the leaf, right? Let's try to read the next question. When does it happen? What do you think? When does photosynthesis happen? Again, if you're watching this later, then you can pause this video later and of course answer these questions yourself. Okay? When does it happen? It happens when in the presence of sunlight and chlorophyll. Remember, it happens during the day. Yes, of course. It happens during the day because sunlight is only there during the day, right? Next question. Sorry, I'll just like swiggle away. What are the inputs, right? What is something that's going in the process of photosynthesis, right? Remember the equation that we saw, right? What is going in the process of photosynthesis? All right. So there is carbon dioxide and water. Two very important key components. Carbon dioxide goes in through stomata and water goes in through the vessels in the stem. Okay. Now, what are the outputs? What do you think are the outputs of photosynthesis? What is the byproduct that is produced during the process of photosynthesis? You forgot water, that's okay. That's normal, everybody forgets sometimes. Alright, so what are the outputs? Outputs are basically carbohydrates and oxygen. Carbohydrates, which is basically the food, right? And oxygen, which we breathe in, right? Perfect. Now, which cell does it take place in? Alright. Now, if you have not seen the cell video that I've done before, I would highly recommend you go back and check out the cell video, the plant cell and animal cell. What do you think? Is it done in the plant cell or animal cell? I'm not asking about which part of the leaf, I'm talking about which cell. Do you think it's plant cell or animal cell? It's, of course, very logical. It actually happens in the plant cell. Animal cells cannot perform photosynthesis, right? Because they don't have chlorophyll, we don't make our own food. Plant cells, in fact, have chlorophyll, they make their own food. Now, what happens to the energy created? What happens to the energy created? Energy that is created is actually stored. Okay, let me go back to the previous slide. Hold on. Alright, so actually the energy that is created is stored. When I say energy is stored, that basically means plant stores all the food that it has in the form of fruits, vegetables, in stems or in flowers. Now we have done a nutrition video where we have talked about the different parts of plants that we eat. If you have not checked that video out, I would highly recommend you go back, take a look at it. Just that part of the video where we talk about different parts of the plants that we can eat. Right? So energy stored basically means that plants basically store all the food that they have made in the form of fruits, in their stem, in their flowers, right? Or in their roots even. Remember, we eat potatoes. Potatoes is basically that, right? It's basically a plant storing all its energy in its roots. Okay, now there is one or two questions that I want to ask you and then we're going to talk about worksheets. Okay? Let's move on to the next slide. Okay, now I want you to take a look at this picture. I'm going to swig a little close on the left. So what do you think? This is an autotroph or a heterotroph, right? I'm not talking about the plant itself. I'm talking about the yellow thing that's entangled. Do you think it's an autotroph or a heterotroph? It's an autotroph. Okay, all right. I won't comment on that right now. Let's look at the next one. And this is not working. So just bear with me. Okay, this I'm pretty sure all of us are familiar with. Some of us even love to eat. I personally love eating mushrooms. So what do you think? Is mushroom an autotroph or a heterotroph? Do you think mushrooms can make their own food, or do you think mushrooms basically rely on other animals or plants to make their own food? Ma'am, it's a decomposer. Yeah, yes, it is. All right, but so these are two other different forms. Like there are special forms or modes of nutrition. That is something we're going to talk about in the next class. That basically means next week. Alright, so keep this in mind. Now before I leave you for the session, there is something I would like to discuss. So in the link in the description of this video, you will be able to find two worksheets. Okay, you'll be able to find two worksheets. Now I'll explain how to use the worksheets, okay, based on this session. If you want to recap the session, you can of course look at it again, all the slides and all the explanation, right? There are two worksheets. Now there is level 1 worksheet and level 2 worksheet. Now level 1 worksheet is easy, okay, it's a little bit easy, and level 2 worksheet is a little bit more difficult. In level 1 worksheet, you'll basically be remembering and recalling everything that you've learned, right? Simple, just definitions, fill in the blanks, alright. But in the second level 2 worksheet, you'll basically be asked a lot of why, right? So there's a lot of thinking in the second worksheet. So according to how confident you feel about what you have learned in the class today, you can attempt level 1 worksheet or level 2 worksheet. Alright, and if you feel super confident, then you can attempt both the worksheets. That's all good. There is one clarity that I would like to make before we go ahead with the worksheets. There is this diagram kind of a thing, right, in one of the worksheets. It's very important to understand what this is, right? So here is where you will write the differences, right, and here is where you'll write the similarity, right? There's a question which asks you write or draw similarity or difference, right? So do that. So according to what you've understood from the session, go ahead, give me feedback on how do you like the worksheets and if you think they work. Yes, it's a Venn diagram. So here you write the differences and here in the middle you write the similarities. Well, that is it for today's session. I had a lot of fun, and try out the worksheets and let me know if that works out for you and give me feedback, and I'll see you in the next class. Thank you so much. Bye.